Welcome back to my Obi-Wan rewrite, where we'll be going over episode 3. Honestly, I think episode 3 is one of my more favorite episodes in the series, and also one of the episodes I'm most eager to rewrite. There's a lot of interesting elements in this episode that I don't think was properly utilized. Like always, we'll be going over first impression criticisms first, then the rewrite. If you're new to the series, I highly recommend starting with episode 1 to avoid confusion. With all that out of the way, let's begin. First criticism, too soon. The reunion between Kenobi and Darth Vader was too soon. Also, it came off strongly that Darth Vader had officially surpassed Kenobi, and we all know that's not possible because of what was said in the very first Star Wars film between these two iconic characters.
I've been waiting for you, Obi-Wan. We meet again at last. The circle is now complete. When I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
Second criticism. Leia was far more tolerable in this episode, and I thought it was a sweet moment where Kenobi briefly talks about her mother and how Leia asks about her biological parents. This to me emphasizes that Leia is experiencing an identity crisis because of her lineage, and it's a little upsetting that it's not addressed more. Third criticism. I think it's safe to say that Reva is going to be a reoccurring issue at this point. The opening with Kenobi meditating while Darth Vader suits up is a fine opening, but after that I want to change a good bit. While Kenobi meditates, he hears something in the back. When he goes to investigate, he sees tiny eyes looking at him from the dark. Leia has finally woken up.
Hello there.
Who are you? Ben Kenobi. Your father sent me to rescue you. What's his name? Bail Organa. He's an old friend of mine, and in case you ask, your mother's name is Bria Organa. Did he just send you? No army? Kenobi notices a look of disappointment and explains that it was better this way. Obviously, Kenobi and Leia are gonna have to meet. I can't keep Leia unconscious throughout my entire rewrite. But the thing is, I wanted the first time they interact with each other to be innocent. I don't really know any other way to word it. I noticed in the series, and I see it a lot in other medias as well, Leia is sometimes portrayed far more mature than she should be for her age. The thing about children in stories, where the protagonist is an adult, they're often there to help the adults stay grounded, and essentially keep them from taking things too far, going to the dark side, so to speak. Children are also put in stories to help redeem characters that have done questionable things. Logan's a good example, and so is The Last of Us. The thing is, if the children is made to act just as mature as the adults, it dilutes the innocence the child is supposed to represent. So I will be writing Leia more childlike. Kenobi goes on explaining what took place, leaving the Inquisitors out of it, and tells her where they're heading now. Leia announces that she's hungry, but Kenobi already scoured the ship. There's nothing to eat. With the pleasantries out of the way, the ship announces its scheduled arrival. What takes place after they arrive on the planet, I see no issue with, until Kenobi starts talking about what the Empire has done to the planet. From my understanding, Bail Organa is part of the Empire system, but actually tries to do good with his position. Clearly, Leia wouldn't know the travesties the Empire is committing, but when Kenobi unintentionally opens the door for Leia to start questioning the Empire that she is inevitably a part of, I want her to fight it. I want her to argue her point of view, the one she was taught. That's another criticism I have about her character. Throughout the journey, she is having her innocence stripped away, but she doesn't really react to the events in question, and it never seems to affect or stay with her for too long. Walking down the road, Leia hesitantly informs Kenobi that she has to use the bathroom. He finds a bush big enough for her to go in private. Leia is very displeased with this but has no other option. She asks him to step away. Kenobi walks a few yards away but spots something out into the distance. Believing it to be his master, Qui-Gon, he follows the figure. Leia finishes but can't find Kenobi. She calls out to him but gets no response. Someone driving down the road spots her and asks if she needs help. She takes a breath and gives the performance of her life. Kenobi catches up to the figure, but is horrified to see Sith's eyes looking back at him. Realizing his mistake, he quickly makes his way back to Leia but finds her gone. He spots tire tracks and has no other option but to follow. Again, I'm trying to limit their interaction, and this is also to give Leia's character the opportunity to find her feet. I noticed how awkward Kenobi's character can sometimes be with Leia, and I think that's cute. So I'm trying to play on that a little myself, with her needing to use the bathroom and how that can be a little more difficult because she's a girl. And it kind of reminds me of Monsters, Inc. in that scene where Sully had to take Boo to the bathroom. With the death of the Grand Inquisitor, the fifth brother takes charge. Scanning the log, they discover the ship's destination and start to make plans, but are alerted of an incoming call. It's him. They all bow their heads, for this is their first time meeting him. Only the Grand Inquisitor ever spoke with him, and it was always in private. He demands a report and the fifth brother promises the issue to be resolved soon. He abruptly ends the call and everything is silent. Even though they weren't in the same room as him, the weight of his presence was still overwhelming. When the feeling finally passes, they quickly get to work. In the beginning of the episode, as Darth Vader is suiting up, that was clearly for the sole purpose to intimidate. But after that, nothing. The other Inquisitors don't seem fazed by him at all. Even when they're face to face with him, they don't even flinch, and that was such a disappointment. Because that's the whole point of Darth Vader. You're supposed to be intimidated and scared of him. It's also Darth Vader. He should naturally steal the scene every single damn time. The ball was dropped in this episode, and I'm trying. Kenobi arrives at a checkpoint and tries to sneak past but gets caught. Preparing to fight his way through, a woman announces that he's with her. With a little convincing, they let him through. When they're alone, Kenobi wastes no time asking why. She ignores his question and demands to know if he came with someone else. He hesitantly says yes, and she bombards him with question after question of male or female, age, clothing description. When Kenobi answers all her questions to her satisfaction, she reveals that she's Hajj's contact. She tells him that his daughter Padme is safe. Kenobi is silent for a moment but gives his gratitude. She takes him to her. She's surrounded by stormtroopers that are relaxing in a tavern. Leia's relieved to see Kenobi and tries to go to him, but one of the soldiers stops her. Kenobi slowly approaches, and the stormtrooper scolds him for losing his daughter. Kenobi apologizes and takes Padme. Tala takes them to the android maintenance storage unit and gives them a moment with each other. Why did you run off? You were the one that left me! You're right. That was my fault, and I'm sorry. They're nothing like you said they were. They were really nice to me. Gave me food. They're not bad. Not all of them. Where did you come up with the name Padme? On my 6th birthday, my cousin told me I wasn't a real Organa. I asked my parents about it, and they told me that I was adopted, in my real mom's name. Leia sees the hurt in Kenobi's eyes and asks if he knew her. He nods but ends the conversation after that. Tala shows them the tunnel that she'll be smuggling them through, but are startled when stormtroopers start searching the unit, with an Inquisitor, the fourth sister, carefully watching behind them. When they're gone, Leia becomes confused as to why the soldiers are hunting them when they were so nice to her before. Kenobi's unsure how to explain it, but Tala tells her how she joined the Empire, believing and being told one thing but then seeing and doing things that was the opposite. Sometimes the truth is scary, and that makes it easier to believe the lie. Like I previously said, I wanted Leia to be more childlike and question things that doesn't conform to what she's been taught. With that said, I'm starting to question if they may have given Leia the wrong age. I wonder if it would have come off better if she was 8 or maybe even 7. Anyways, the additional scene with the stormtroopers, I wrote that in to somewhat humanize them and to also contradict Kenobi. If I had directed this, obviously they would have had their helmets off in the tavern, showing their faces. I would want the tavern somewhat poorly lit, causing their faces to be shadowed, still covering their humanity. The one who addressed Kenobi would be the one whose face we see, but his face would still have shadows. I know in this episode Kenobi and Leia bond talking about their families, but I'm saving that for later. As they prepare to leave, screaming can be heard outside. The fifth brother is being aggressive, forcing all civilians to be rounded up. Tala tells him that they need to leave, but an overwhelming feeling overtakes Kenobi. Without explanation, he urges Tala to take Leia without him. Both girls argue against that, but Kenobi insists. He tells Tala that he can feel someone coming, that is a serious threat. Tala insists that's all the more reason they need to leave now, but Kenobi explains that he's too close, and if he doesn't feel him already, it'll only be a matter of time. They're connected. Tala's too experienced to ignore Kenobi's warning. She tells him of another route he can take, but is out in the open. She takes Leia, but she refuses to leave without Kenobi. To make the departure easier, he gives her Lola that he fixed while she was asleep on the ship. Tala picks Leia up and starts making her way down the tunnel. It doesn't take long for the Inquisitors too to feel a disturbance. It's him. The fifth brother gives out orders to both Inquisitor and stormtroopers to line up. They can feel him approach. A part of Kenobi wants to see him, but the intensity of his former paladin's presence is already too much. He leaves without ever taking a glance, leaving the Inquisitors to withstand the force that is Darth Vader. They all look down, not wanting to make eye contact with him. He stands still for a moment, but then uses the force to pull one of the stormtroopers out of line. It was the one that spoke to Kenobi. He's apologetic, stating he didn't know. Vader drops him and makes his way towards the droid storage unit. He breaks down the door, stating he was here. The fourth sister is petrified, realizing her blunder. She's violently pushed against the wall. Vader makes it clear he will not tolerate any more oversights. They all quickly spread out in search of Kenobi. Darth Vader's presence, I don't believe, was properly utilized in this episode, and this whole sequence was to reestablish what an overwhelming threat Darth Vader has become in the short amount of time that he has existed in this world, because Darth Vader is a separate entity from Anakin Skywalker, and that is established in the very first film.
How did my father die?
A young Jedi named Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil. He betrayed and murdered your father.
The lack of fear the Inquisitors had was such an issue. I don't know if it bothered anyone else, but it bothered me, and I just wanted to make this character as intimidating as I could. One of the ways I thought to do this was by having most of the characters not say his name, and instead, when speaking about this character, they address them as him or he, because that's how much Vader intimidated them, just like another character whose name shall not be said. Also, it would make sense if Kenobi intentionally avoided seeing Vader. In the show, it's portrayed that he's curious to see what Anakin has become, but avoids making contact until he can't. Even though a part of him does want to see, it would make more sense that Kenobi would avoid laying eyes on the aftermath. When someone goes through something traumatic, it's understandable that they wouldn't be eager to revisit that trauma, no matter how much time has passed. Tala reaches the port and the pilot urges that they need to leave before it's too late. Leia doesn't want to leave without Ben, and neither does Tala. I want to make it clear that throughout this entire rewrite, Kenobi consistently introduces himself as Ben, and the only time that his name is spoken is by the Inquisitors and Vader when he's the subject, but they don't speak his name to his face. That was a criticism that people did have, and rightfully so, because in the first Star Wars film, you can clearly see how Obi-Wan reacts when he hears his name for the first time, and the way he vocalizes how it's been a long time tells you that yes, it has been a long time since he's last heard his name.
He claims to be the property of an Obi-Wan Kenobi. Is he a relative of yours? Do you know who he's talking about?
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan. Now that's a name I've not heard in a long time. A long time.
She instructs the pilot to wait as long as he can, but if necessary, the child is first priority. He agrees and Tala goes back for Kenobi. In what world does a grown-ass man's life matter more than a child's? Fundamentally, we as humans value the lives of children above an adult's life, because children are the future. You cannot have a future without children. All forms of media have portrayed this in some fashion, where adult or even teen characters fight tooth and nail to protect the child character, and if they fail, they are often portrayed to be haunted by that failure because it's a child's life. And a lot of times, the only way to be redeemed for that failure is by saving another child's life. Kenobi steadily makes his way to the rendezvous point but feels another presence. It's not as malicious as the previous one, but instead, it somewhat reminds him of a child. He hears a saber being drawn and looks up. He barely dodges Reva's saber. With his own saber in hand, he prepares to draw, but something's different with this Inquisitor. She's not quick to violence, and there's no blood loss. In fact, Kenobi can barely feel anything from her, almost as if the thing that made her human has been removed. Despite that, there is something familiar about her. With Kenobi hesitant to engage, Reva strikes, forcing him to defend himself. After a few exchanges, he notices that her style mimics the Grand Inquisitor's, but lacks the experience necessary to make it as deadly as he did. However, her precision and lack of emotion has Kenobi wondering if he's fighting a droid. As the fight goes on, Reva's demeanor slips and that familiar feeling starts to get stronger. Determined now, Kenobi quickly disarms Reva and uses the Force. In that brief moment, all the pain of the numerous reconditionings rush to the surface, but among the chaos, a glimpse of a Jedi can be seen. The fight is over as Reva screams in pain. Kenobi wants to help, but he can't move his body. From the distance, a red lightsaber triggers a fire. Kenobi's heart beats rapidly as he's being pulled towards the flames, towards him. However, a shot forces Vader to seize his control of Kenobi to stop the blast from hitting him. But it wasn't what he thought it was. With it inches away, it explodes, disorienting all of them. With what little strength he has left, Kenobi uses the Force to push himself out of the fire. Blacking out, he feels himself being picked up but loses consciousness. I apologize if I'm using the Force wrong, but when I rewrote Reva's backstory, I immediately envisioned this to be how she breaks from the Grand Inquisitor's control, with the help of Kenobi. Because sometimes with abuse victims, they need outside help to break that violent cycle they're in. Along with that, this rewrite was specifically to prevent these two iconic characters from fighting each other. Because like I said in the beginning of the video, it was just too soon. Let it simmer, tease the audience, but don't give them the main course before they finish the appetizers. I really did like the scene with the fire, and to be honest, I don't blame Darth Vader for doing that to Kenobi. I promise you, I don't hate Kenobi's character. I really do like him, but he did let Anakin burn to death, or at least he thought he did. That's a very painful way to go. A very painful and slow way to go. He didn't even try to end his pain or suffering, he just let it happen. With all that being said, I'm not really sure what kind of weaponry exists in this universe outside of blasters and lightsabers. But when Tala positioned herself as a sniper, but instead of the usual blaster attack, it instead is some type of grenade. Obviously, it wouldn't hurt Vader, but simply stun them for the purpose of grabbing Kenobi. The pilot determines it's time, but Leia refuses to leave, but he just picks her up, but then they hear someone in the tunnel. He puts her down, but as soon as he does, he can't breathe. Leia backs away, unsure what's wrong. He desperately tells her to run, but it's too late. And that's all she wrote. That was just to tie loose ends and end the episode. I think we can all agree that the showdown between master and student was the biggest issue with this episode, and while there were other issues, they weren't drastic. Overall, this was a pretty solid episode for me. Tell me what you think. Like always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Please like and subscribe.